Welcome back to the Attract Online conference. We hope that you had the chance to chat already with the other participants. It is a possibility that we have from the conference website. And that also that you have taken the possibility to schedule one-to-one virtual meeting with them, starting today at 4 until tomorrow at 6. So we have special slots, and for this you need to be registered and reach to the other participant to schedule a common slot together. So really take the chance of this, because this is the networking opportunity that will only last until tomorrow at 6. And we have a lot of interesting profiles gathered on the platform, close to 1,000. So I'm sure you're going to find people with whom to interact and look for opportunities for the future, especially regarding igniting the deep tech revolution. So it's time now to invite you to our last panel of the day. So the panel will look into the funding opportunities regarding disruptive innovation, as well as the role of research infrastructures in this context. So it will be moderated by Mark Ferguson, who is the Director General of Science Foundation Ireland, and also the chair of the EIC Pilot Advisory Board. And so I'll let you now with Mark and his panelists for a very lively discussion.
On this panel, we're going to discuss about innovation and how we can support innovation in Europe. So I've got a very distinguished group of panelists. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves and say in about a couple of minutes what it is that they contribute to the innovation ecosystem in Europe. Marie, can I start with you first, please?
So thank you, Mark, for the introduction, and thanks, guys, for having me here. My name is Marie. I work for High-Tech Gründerfonds. This is a German early-stage fund, and we do early-stage investment in startups that are in high-tech. So across different sectors, from industrial tech to life science, chemistry, material science, all the way to digital. We are partially German state-funded and partially from 33 LPs that come from the corporate world. My background is in chemistry, so I have a PhD in nanochemistry, did an MBA, then went into venture capital. I specialize in the specific area of chemistry due to my background, and I'm very pleased to be here today.
Great, thank you. We'll come back to that in a moment with very interesting funds. Leopold, can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do?
Sure, Mark. So I'm Leopold de Midelaire. I'm here on behalf of ERMA, the European Industrial Research Management Association, which clusters cross-industrial interest in R&D and applied R&D. I'm honorary president of this association, and I spent all my career in industry, especially with the Solvay, where I ended in managing the long-term research and corporate venturing, which is obviously a link to this Attract program, as you can imagine. I'm a member of the project advisory committee of the Attract program, so I will be the voice to a certain extent of industry here.
Great, thank you very much. Fabien, tell us all about yourself and the European Innovation Council, which I know a little bit about. So over to you, Fabien.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks also for having me here today. I'm Fabien Gautier, and I work at the European Commission, and I'm working in DG Research and Innovation, which is supporting research and innovation all over Europe with its framework program Horizon 2020, and also in the future, very soon, Horizon Europe. I'm working in the task force in charge of setting up the European Innovation Council for the future. This European Innovation Council will support breakthrough innovation, and I'm working in the unit in charge of European innovation ecosystems, which is the policy support part of the future European Innovation Council, which aims basically at bringing together the various actors of innovation ecosystems in Europe. So I'll tell you more about EIC in a moment, and I'm very happy to be here today. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. And Giorgio, say a few words about yourself and your background and how it's of relevance for innovation. Over to you.
Good morning. My name is Giorgio Rosa. I'm an experimental physicist and university professor of physics in Milano. And I've been involved with research infrastructures for a large part of my career, managing infrastructures, operating, but also serving as chair of ESFRI, as well as of chair of a high-level expert group that more recently has addressed the best possible configuration of infrastructures for long-term sustainability and for optimized funding. So in all of these, of course, the interface between fundamental research and innovation has been discussed and addressed, and some ideas came up that turned out to be innovation in the service of the infrastructures, but also services from infrastructure to help innovation, motivated, of course, by the society and the economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Mark Ferguson. I'm the Director General of Science Foundation Ireland and the Chief Scientific Advisor to the Government of Ireland. And I'm also the Chair of the Advisory Board of the European Innovation Council. So what we'll do is we'll kick off with a few comments. Touched on here was the importance, and certainly initially, of public funding to support innovation. Marie, I know the Gründe funds started with initially public funding and then brought in private funding. Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Sure, of course. So as the name says, well, high-tech Gründerfonds. Gründer actually means foundation or incorporation fund in German. So we were founded in 2005 as a public fund that specialized in early stage investments. Now we're in our third fund, so we have about 900 million euros under management across these three funds. And our third fund has right around 60% funding from the German Ministry of Economics and Finance and German state-owned developmental bank, so 60% private, public, and 40% private from 35 corporate LPs like Bosch, Bayer, SAP, BASF, Evonik, and the DAX list, plus a couple of mid-sized companies. So when we were founded, our goal was and still is to support innovation in Germany. But of course, since we're also private now, we have this sort of private point of view that we also want to make sustainable investments. So first, innovation in Germany. So really going to research institutions, bringing good quality German research out of universities and beyond, but also with this other business sort of aspect. And like I said, we're pretty successful. So we've been on the market for 15 years. We've just celebrated our 15th anniversary, and some of our points for best practice, I guess, why that we're so successful. I mean, this is obviously an ongoing analysis from our side, is I think we're quite unique in how decisions are made in our board. So although we're public-private, with public being these, this money from the German state, obviously on our decision-making boards, we don't have politicians and bureaucrats, God forbid, sitting on these boards. Not that I have anything against politicians and bureaucrats, but really the German state sort of sends 3 people who vote on behalf of them. And that would be one person who is the director of Max Planck Institute, another research institute, a serial entrepreneur, serial VC, plus voting from the corporate side. So this sort of networking effect with industry, as well as a decision-making body that's not all too public.
Very good. Thank you very much. That's really interesting. And I guess these public-private conglomerates and co-investment really important for early stage high tech and for crowding in further private investment. I mean, that's part of the thinking behind the European Innovation Council. Fabien, you want to tell us a little bit about that and how it's hoped that the European Commission can use its funding to crowd in private funding and also to support high tech early stage. Over to you.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, indeed, public funding is key, I believe, in supporting innovation and throughout the whole innovation chain. And as you mentioned, it's we need investment, and there is in Europe a funding gap on innovation, and also a gap in bridging public funding and also private investment. And I believe that here public funding can play a role because usually innovation are high risky project, deep tech projects. It's high risky, and very often the investors are reluctant to support young companies, to support high risky projects. And I believe that here public institutions and also the European Commission can play a role, because we can push the process in supporting innovation, in providing funding to it, also in attracting investors in a way that through the fact that we support these high risky projects and innovators, we de-risk these projects. And that is precisely what the EIC is doing. The objective is with the EIC to support this breakthrough innovation, to support deep tech projects, and to become for the future, in attracting investors, to become what we call our EU unicorn factory. So the European Innovation Council has been set up for this purpose. We have a pilot running under Horizon 2020, and we will have a fully fledged European Innovation Council under Horizon Europe. So how is it working? Basically, through the European Innovation Council, we support innovation from early stage research up to the moment where this research and the innovation reaches the market, and we support these projects financially. So here we will provide, through the European Innovation Council, a mixture of funding where we will provide grants to these early stage projects, and the more they get closer to the market, we will be able, through the European Innovation Council, to provide also another type of funding, which is quite new under the framework programs of research that we are implementing for years. We will provide the possibility to have equity finance to these projects, and this will attract other investors, because we will be those which will step in first in those companies, in those promising companies, and we will also expect attracting other investors. We have launched a pilot for the EIC under Horizon 2020 with a budget of 3 billion for 2018 to 2020. And it has been very successful. If we look at the figures from the first calls which have been launched since 2018, we have attracted more than 10,000 applications from startups and SMEs for the EIC Accelerator. And we have, through this application, a cumulative budget of a request for budget of around 26 billion euros. So you can see here how much money funding is needed in order to support these companies. And it also has attracted this pilot private investment, also at the level of 2.5 billion euros. So these are quite huge amounts which are there and which support those companies from the early stage phase until the moment where they will reach the market. And through the European innovation ecosystems, that's what we intend to support now through this pilot, and also for the future via what we call the Pathfinder, where we support these projects via grants and this early stage research, which is getting close to the market, and then via the Accelerator, where we have those projects which are major to attract investment and to attract also private investment. So this is in a nutshell how the European Innovation Council is working, and what we intend to do with the funding under Horizon Europe, the Future Framework Programme for Research, which is in the proposal for the Commission at an amount of 10 billion euros. So this is the overall framework in which we will be supporting breakthrough innovation in the future.
Thank you. That's very interesting. And I mean, obviously shows a great demand, which is very good. Obviously, we need to try and fill that with the appropriate finance. Now, companies are really important for taking innovation through to the market. I mean, they have huge reach in terms of sale, they have a lot of skills and so on. Leopold, do you want to say something about the kind of corporate environment and how that can help innovators, particularly in Europe?
So yes, Mark, definitely. It's all about breaking walls, you know, and these walls are becoming thicker and thicker when you go down the road to applications indeed. And the reason for that is that the financial risk you take in industry is increasing considerably. And so trying to find the right people in industry to talk to and to build something relevant around the whole chain, from the IDs, individual and team IDs, to a global market application, because it's all about that for us. It's something that is really difficult with industry, but there are ways to do it. I will tell you that maybe later, but it's difficult because the time frame is completely different. At one point you can publish or convince people over a click, and a campaign for promoting a product or a new technology is something very, very, very long to do. So I feel that the first output of all these deep tech programs is to prepare and to provide new people, new engineers, new scientists that are coming on stream and are looking at very old problems in a completely different way, you know. Imagery for them is not the imagery of myself. I was trained in NMR imagery. It's no way to look at it the way I did in the past. So it's the same. So you prepare these new people that will break these walls, you know. And usually the hierarchy has no clue how to do it because it's long-term thing. It's a long-term thing. So you are talking about the education time frame, which takes for a human being 20 years at the end. But so that's the first output, I would say. So I'm really happy to see that all this, the financing of the first steps is done by definition by public money. Education is made by public money in our regions itself. And so I'm very happy to see that, and industry is very happy to see that. The problem is that to make this connection without interrupting the chain. And so I would say that talking to the networks of industrials called the corporate venturing networks are very important. The people that are allowed to think out of the box and risk a piece of money with public partners, whatever, to check if the new deep technologies and the new people arising are relevant for their goals, for their long-term, mid-term and long-term goals. That's my first quote for that.
If I may add a point, Mark, if I'm allowed to sort of jump into discussion, I think we cannot undervalue the importance of the private sector and industry. So just as you said, Leopold, like for our fund, I think one of its inherent properties, the value we bring to the startups is indeed that in our board, our LPs, the corporates, the industry is sitting. And obviously it's not just a yay or nay, but there's an ongoing circular discussion. I mean, we bind or we ask our LPs, we ask our corporate industrial investors to sort of also participate in the reference calls and the whole due diligence process. So no matter how good a scientific innovation is, if there is no market relevance, it's not going to happen. And the earlier this sort of feedback loop happens and the earlier the founders can get qualified feedback, this obviously helps the process much further.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to jump in on what Marie said and also Leopold, because they mentioned the different actors that play a role in innovation. And I believe that this is key, making these different connections. And while we are talking a lot about funding through our programs, through our strategies, there is also another element which is important besides funding. Funding is not the only solution to tackle the challenges that we have nowadays. There are also other means which are important in order to build the connection within the different players in the innovation ecosystem, and that's precisely also what we will do in the future, dedicating specific policy support to bring together the various actors, the universities, together with the startups, with the investors, with public authorities, with regional, local actors, and so on. And here there is also a role to play in building an ecosystem that supports also the innovators, not only through funding, but also through the different connections and through the means that they put at their disposal, for instance, to get the appropriate competencies in their companies and so on. So I believe that this aspect, which is policy and supporting innovators and supporting the ecosystem, is also a key element to bring innovation forward.
Absolutely, it's all part of the system. Leopold, I'm going to bring you in, and then Giorgio, I'm going to get you to talk about infrastructure and the importance of infrastructure for innovation and access to big kit for some companies. But Leopold, you wanted to react first.
Yes, I just jumped in there because I think that the public involvement brings more than money indeed. It brings relevance, it brings social relevance, because by definition in industry we sometimes are, we have to confess it, blinded by money, you know. And then you bring something more. I often see that in boards for small startups. You bring social relevance. These big challenges are coming in. Jobs are very important, and all of the dimensions. Without this dimension, by the way, the project will not evolve in time. It's more than money. I completely agree about that. And even in industry, we think like that.
It's absolutely more than money. And I was on an interesting call last week with Eric Schmidt, and he gave a quotation. He said, you know, your happiness is proportional to the quality of your thoughts. So if you have great thoughts as an innovator, you can solve social problems and you can make money, but you can also be happy, which is wonderful. Giorgio, you want to talk a little bit about infrastructure and you know, how innovators can access that infrastructure, whether it's big kit or maybe a lab space that they need?
Yes, thank you. Well, research infrastructures have been built all over the world, and with particular attention in Europe, to support excellent science. So the so-called curiosity-driven science. So to give to European scientists the best possible tools to perform observations, experiments, analysis. And this is the core business. But as the whole ensemble of the research infrastructure grew, it became very clear that they can provide new kind of services by addressing aspects of complex problems that come from society or that come from economy, and that are not of a curiosity-driven nature, but are part of issues that the society wants to address. But let me say that, and this is being done by interconnecting research infrastructures, by the effort of making all the data of science available through the European Open Science Cloud and this kind of approach. But let me say something about innovation. Innovation is about making products or making methods based on existing knowledge. I remember in the very early 80s, when I moved back from the US to France, in the control room of the linear accelerator where I was working, there were touch screens in the control room to open valves, to set values of fields and so on. And then it took over 30 years before the touchscreen has become a daily tool on telephones or on computers, on the car displays, and so on. So the knowledge that was developed for a need at a research infrastructure has been there for a long time, and maybe too long. Maybe it would have been good if there were activities favoring the idea that this technology could be captured for other uses that were not only, synchronizing in the best way and simplifying the work of operators of complex physics instruments. And if I am allowed just to make one example of something that is happening nowadays, that happened last years, in the construction of research infrastructure in Brazil, the National Synchrotron, CIRIO, they needed to do everything at home because of political and economic reasons. And as they are ambitious and they have built a top world top level facility, ranging in the same class as the European synchrotron radiation facility, they needed to train industry, local industry. The São Paulo state is very strong in engineering, but still they did not have the competence to build such a sophisticated accelerator system. And so they trained 20 to 25, I forget the exact number, companies to produce, and then what they needed. And then they put them in competition, and 2 or 3 of these companies got the market, and others got the knowledge, got the instruction, and they produced, several of them produced a bid, and so they were well equipped to be high-tech companies for other applications. So this is the infrastructure that creates innovation. So the demand of the infrastructure creates innovation also for the industry. Now the reverse problem is a little more tricky. So how well a company that has a clear ideas of what is its innovation needs can use the infrastructures, and there is a debate on that, of course.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting. I mean, the idea of having to do things remotely, I guess, has really come to the fore with the COVID pandemic, which, if anything, has accelerated the public perception of science and innovation and the importance of it. So I guess coming out of COVID, I'm going to ask any of you or each of you, what do you think are going to be the really interesting innovations? Do you think we're going to see an acceleration of digitalization, AI? Do you think people are going to really look at the climate agenda with an innovative approach to try and make money and do good for the planet at the same time? So do you think there are huge opportunities coming out of COVID, and what could we in Europe do to get more innovators into that space? Anyone want to take that first? Or I'm going to pick on someone. Fabien, I'm going to pick on you. And then I'm going to pick on you, Marie. So over to you first, Fabien.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, through the COVID crisis, we can see that there are huge challenges that we have to face, and we need a response to these challenges. The crisis that we face has changed drastically the way we were working. It happened it happened almost overnight, where we had the whole economies and societies to stop, to kept locked down, to find other ways to work, to also fight, to support also research and innovation, to find a vaccine and so on. So we can see that how rapidly changes are coming, and that we can also face huge challenges, which are not only national or local or at European level. These challenges are global. Other challenges which are essential and which are also linked to the current crisis that we face nowadays, which are of course the climate change, and this is also we need to tackle the economic and the social situation that will arise from the current pandemic, and also from these are typically challenges that we need to face, that we cannot solve alone, that where we need to act globally and where we need to tackle them all together at European and also at national level, and in cooperation also globally. So these priorities are clearly priorities of the European Commission. Climate, the current pandemic, we responded at the level of the Commission very quickly to this pandemic, providing funding to this pandemic, participating, leading to the global pledge where we gathered around 16 billion euro to find access to test treatments and vaccines for the pandemic. So here, this kind of priorities which emerge or which are in front of us, we have to tackle them. And there is also another key priority that we have in the Commission, which is, of course, the digitization of the society. And again, the current situation clearly an example how quickly also, because this is also to be seen, we have seen how fast also the societies and the economies can adapt and can adapt to change, can adapt to situations that were unforeseen a few weeks or months before. And here the digitization also of our economies and of our societies will be key. And artificial intelligence is also linked to this. So there is a number of key priorities that we are, of course, tackling at the level of the European Commission, and on which we provide policy measures and funding, like, for instance, the example of funding to support research and innovation linked to the current pandemic, where we reacted quite quickly, and also via the European Innovation Council, where we were also able to quickly put some funding at the disposal of the EIC in order to search for remedies to the current crisis. So yes, key priorities that we need to tackle all together at European and national level and globally.
Thank you. I think it's really interesting. You know, it's often said COVID accelerated the trends we knew about before COVID. It's accelerated digitalization, it's accelerated virtual learning, artificial intelligence, robotics, automation. I used to tell people that, you know, there would be robots, talking robots looking after old people. And before COVID, people used to think I was nuts when I said that. And now it's actually a real commercial possibility. In fact, a very good possibility. So really interesting how these pandemics produce challenges on one hand, but huge opportunities on the other. Marie, have you seen some of that in your investment?
Yeah, so definitely I agree that even on a company level, right, COVID has been sort of a forceful digital. I mean, we never used to have meetings on Zoom or Microsoft Teams. Well, rarely, but this has sort of become the norm. And what we sort of see in the investment space is also that huge amount of public funding for sectors that were, I wouldn't say largely overlooked, but less sexy in terms of investment. I mean, example is antivirals, antimicrobials. In terms of investments, they were rather unsexy, but we see this huge amount of public funding that goes into these fields, because I think for people it's been a huge wake-up call. And topics also like sustainability, which you mentioned, I think it really does take a pandemic for people to realize, oh, so what I take for granted, like the fact that when I'm in the hospital, I take antibiotics and I don't die from a very simple infection, like the fact that I go to the supermarket and my supply chains are working, like the fact that I have things to eat, I have water in terms of sustainability. All these things that you take for granted on a day-to-day basis actually hangs by a thread, and that we as society actually have to do sustainable investments, that more money has to go in these fields that have not typically been the fields that have brought the most return. Nevertheless, I think that although this huge wave of public perception and the funding that comes with this is very positive, obviously you also have to look at issues like IP transfer from research institutions into startups. So you are putting a lot of money into research that is going to incentivize people to spin out. However, there are certain steps in between that and something becoming a sustainable startup that is going to make a market impact. And for me, that's really the topic of, well, first of all, the founders being able to structure a business plan, the founders getting out of there, but also the universities and the founders coming to a good consensus what it takes for the IP to spin out of research institutions, because obviously the IP has been made within the research institutions, and the conditions thereof for it to go into the market also has to be profitable and favorable for the founders, for the research institutions, obviously, but also investors that come in and invest in that kind of company.
Very good, thank you. I agree. I mean, it's interesting, during the Corona crisis, in Science Foundation Ireland, in February, we did, I think, on average 4 video conferences, Zoom calls per month. In April, we did 4,000. In July, we did 8,000. So the scale of the change is, you know, 4 to 4,000 to 8,000. I guess what you want, Marie, is the same scale of change in the transfer of IP from universities into companies. If we could accelerate how we get some of that done, it would be a really interesting perspective. Leopold, do you have anything from either the COVID or the IP environment from companies? Because clearly you want to spin businesses out of companies as well as out of universities.
Sure, Mark. I learned the Ferguson law now. You double the number of Zoom of Zoom meetings every month. That's interesting. So now, first of all, it's a bit scary for industry what happens. Everything is moving so fast, and at the end, industry to a certain extent is anchored by its hard assets. You have to depreciate your assets, and you can be bound by a production of an outdated chip factory, for instance. But by the way, you don't just close it down and restart something else. So there is a timing issue there that makes industry to a certain extent very scary. And second thing that makes it scary is this necessity now to work cross-boundary in industry. Look at medtech, it's absolutely obvious. If you don't link physics to medical applications, to instrumentation, to mathematics and smart statistics and all these things, you just end in nothing. So it's a really difficult time for industry to face this digital age, by the way. On top of that, the people are also aging, and the people that you recruit, you have to train them because they were not trained to face these kinds of tools. It's not easy. It's not an easy turn, by the way. Concerning IP, it's also something that is very strange. I hear sometimes people saying, what's the interest still to make IP? Because the faster we go, the best it gets. So why to be stuck for 20 years with an outdated patent at the end? And the whole thing is really stuck in what happened in the past. IP, I own something, and nowadays owning something doesn't mean anything, you know. And that's really a paradigm change.
I think the IP question is interesting. I mean, clearly it's different in different sectors. If you're making pharmaceutical drugs or biotech, you know, it's a very significant investment over a long period of time. And I guess their IP is central, but in ICT and AI, where things move so quickly, perhaps less so. And I think what's really interesting also is in those sectors where the open source, not just open publishing, but open source has really given rise to new business models, which are essentially service models. So the code and the knowledge is open, but the way in which you service the client is actually what you make your business on. And that's actually been very interesting. I mean, we saw that with COVID tracker apps, for example, where the code was completely public for privacy, but the company still made money because they were able to service the app and process the data and so on. So I think it's a very interesting question, you know, the concept between what you need to protect on the one hand and sometimes how you can make a business even in an open environment. Giorgio, you have anything on these aspects?
Yes, I think COVID has changed a number of things, as we already said, but has shown also an important issue that has to do with the science, with the progress, with the innovation, and I also add with democracy, and that is availability of data. In all this period, the citizens have been faced with very partial information and very inconsistent data. Still in the news, you know, the number of every day's new infected people, and then the comment, yes, but we did more checks, or yes, but we did less. So that's not information. Information would be how many of the checked people showed infection. Is it increasing, or is stable, or is decreasing? So we have addressed this in the domain of the action of the European Open Science Cloud. The Commission has supported, and this is interesting, COVID-19 data portal. Now, the COVID-19 data portal has created an easy interface to address all the scientific data relevant to COVID, and these are, you know, the virus genome, the human genome, and all of these, in fact, was already very well linked, because this is the science, the hard science part in biology, which is well connected. It's good to make it easier for the people. But what is missing is the clinical data, the phenotype data, those data that are absolutely necessary in order to make a model that will connect the hard science to what is happening to the real population, and perhaps develop models of the development. This has, the development of the infection. This has been missed up to now and still now, and I think it is a major problem. So some practices that are already well eradicated and well present in the scientific community need to cross over to society. An intelligent interpretation of the GDPR, data privacy protection, must be applied, which is compatible with the rules, to apply them intelligently and not use them as a fence to say we do nothing because we don't want to risk any problem on that ground. And making a real open access to all the relevant data for the pandemics, or in the future for a climate emergency, or from anything like that, is the basis for science. We have heard many scientists fighting with each other on TV, but because they were they were arguing opinions, not based on data and data analysis. And
very good.
It has been a big problem, and I hope a lesson that we are learning for.
Absolutely. And open data is really good for innovators, because you can explore the data to try and come up with new products or so on. So we're coming near the end of the session. I'm going to go around quickly and ask everyone, you know, what do you think additionally needs to be done? Clearly, there's a lot happening. The European Innovation Council, the Grunda funds, initiatives out of universities, initiatives out of companies, and so on. But what do you think needs to be done to accelerate the deep tech innovation in Europe, to accelerate the scale up of those companies to be really important companies? So everything from founding through to scale up, whether it's linking national initiatives with European initiatives, or just stuff that we're not doing, or stuff we need to do more of. So what do you think we could do to do more with innovation? Murray, over to you first.
I think that's a very multifaceted question / problem. So first of all, I think the buildup of a intertwined ecosystem is first of all necessary. So I think the problem right now is that, well, it also has inherently to do with the European financial / regional landscape as well, how European Union is also structured. We kind of compare ourselves to the US, but we're not the US. We're actually different countries with their own sovereignty and all rules and regulations and financial laws and innovation landscape. So we do need that one sort of headquarter where we can bring different things together. I know this is in the works and this is sort of developing, but obviously once, you know, it becomes easier for all these stakeholders to know, okay, I go to this one website or one place and I get all the information I need in one pit stop, everything from grants to business plan modeling to IP and whatnot, scale up XXYZ, then obviously this is going to help the process and make it easier. Point one. Point two, I'd like to go back to the IP transfer point. It's just the thing that we see a lot as early stage investors, where that's the bottleneck, sort of. So even if you have great public funding and the startups are willing to spin out, at some point there's a bottleneck, and that is really trying to get IP out of research institution. Obviously, if you have a digital startup that doesn't have a patent, this is something a little bit different. But usually for deep tech and high tech, it happens in laboratories, with facilities, with laboratory infrastructure. So obviously the research institution or university is going to have a claim. And a general IP tech transfer alliance that's inter-European wide, where there are standard best practice conditions to really aid that process, I think would help a lot to bring that public funding startup really out, because that is what we see as a bottleneck as an early stage investor. We have cases where we want to invest in a startup, they want to spin out, and then the discussion over IP. Worst case, they've already signed an IP transfer agreement with a research institution that's completely abnormal in terms of market conformity, meaning that at that point, that startup becomes unattractive for any other investor, which either means we have to renegotiate or not invest, because it's just not a viable business plan anymore. If you're the developmental milestones, the sales milestones, and all these points that come in the IP agreement are too high. So that's the worst case. The best case scenario is we actually go in with the founders to try to help them structure this sort of IP agreement, which is not trivial, which takes weeks, and it just would uncomplicate a lot of the process.
Great. So you would like a one-stop shop. I guess, Fabien, in due course, you'll be telling us the European Innovation Council aims to be that. And Marie, you'd also like easier tech transfer. I used to be very fond of saying, and still am, that if you look in America, most founders who've grown successful businesses give the university much more money in a donation than you ever tax them on the IP. I think that's always useful to bear in the back of your mind. Leopold, what would you do to improve tech and innovation in Europe?
I'll be very practical, Mark, here, because it's all about better resources allocation, by the way. It's a bit my industrial background that brings me to say that. And we have the chance here to have wonderful projects called the tracks, with 175 objectives and maybe beyond that, thousands of objectives, that we could screen and work on. And I like and love the quote of Marie about this exchange platform. We are working at ERMA on a platform, and we'll use the Attract program as a pilot to test it on an exchange platform in between public and private financing. Private meaning private like a VC fund, but also corporate venturing funds, to exchange data around all these projects and understand how it works and what's missing there, and who could be the right stakeholder to get in and discuss in between all the people in a platform, on a platform called Flow, that we will use there. We'll try to make this exercise very practically successful. That's I would do.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Giorgio, what would you do? What would you do to try and improve innovation and tech in Europe?
Well, I would take advantage, I would make measures favoring taking advantage of the knowledge that is developed at research infrastructure. This is my topic. Research infrastructures are big technology and organizational problem solvers. People working at research infrastructure are used to invest millions, tens of millions, occasionally hundreds of millions per year to build something or to organize something that was not built before or was not organized that way before. So headhunters from industry should look at those people, because those people can be extremely helpful in an innovative environment with the economic or social scope, not only pure research scope. And so training, let's say, is a big title that science can contribute to the society beyond doing good science, which is, of course, the fundamental scope and the fundamental important things.
Great. That's very good. So we should send the headhunters in to look when we're doing tech augmentation to the research infrastructures for the problem solvers who are engineers and can solve the problems. Fabien, I'm going to give you the last word on what you would do to improve the European innovation landscape. Over to you.
We have conducted, in order to define our policy for the future and what we could do through Horizon Europe in the future, we have launched a public consultation. And there were three main elements that the different players of the innovation ecosystem have mentioned to you. So what can we do in order to foster innovation? First of all, of course, capital funding is key. We need to have to provide continuous funding to our innovators. Then I also mentioned it before, we need to bring them together, and this was said by Leopold Marie as well, that we need to connect these different actors, investors, innovators, education. We need to bring them together and to connect them and to provide them the means, the platform, in order to exchange their experience, in order to bring their innovations to the market. And also an important element which has been indicated was that we need the right competences as well to innovate. And this is key in the educational process. This is key in fostering also the entrepreneurial culture that we have among young people. And this is also key to have the right competences. And I think it is Giorgio also who mentioned it, or Leopold, that these competences are key in order to make this innovation flourish and also to get to the market. So here we have this, according to me, these three elements which are essential. And in talking about competences and talking about the people who innovate, I believe that also Attract, for instance, is a very good example, because in the Attract project, they have brought young people from different age, different background, different experience, in order to think about how these deep technologies could also be useful for the society. And this diversity of research teams, of innovation teams, according to me, is essential also to bring new innovations to the market. Which maybe as a last word for me would be important is that we also should keep in mind that having these different aspects is also clearly linked to the fact that we need the people, we need to put the people at the core. Those who are facing the current crisis are the people, those who are trying to find the solution are the educators, are the researchers, are the innovators, and those who try to bring them to the market are the businesses, the investors, and we always come back together, come back again to the people who make this innovation ecosystem grow and who make this innovation ecosystem a success. So that would be my last word, that we keep research and innovation and the people who build them at the core of our strategies and policies, and also to whom we direct also our policies.
Very good. So very people-centric view there. It's really interesting. You know, the diversity piece is really important. You know, if you want to be innovative and think left field and out of the box, then you need a diverse group in order to inform that. And that may be diverse in lots of different ways: background, experience, gender, geography, whatever. So I think that's really interesting. And a good ecosystem with procurement from industry, even military procurement, which we haven't spoken about, that's actually really very important driver, for example, in the United States, all the way through to really creative ideas that are coming in the university system, the investment that goes into that, and then the incubator and networking. I mean, it's not a linear thing, it's a circular thing. Each of them feed off each other. And I think I'd just like to close this session by saying that Europe is still and will remain a very attractive place for innovators. Everyone always thinks the United States is better, and it's different, okay, because it's a single market and a single system. But Europe has diversity, and I've just said that diversity is really important. And Europe has social values, and that's really important in addressing things like climate change and the green agenda and so on. And Europe has coherence. We can work together in teams, and we can mobilize the capital. We have creative ideas, and we can scale those companies. So I would want to send a strong message that programs like Attract and programs like the European Innovation Council and lots of others are really important. Companies are really important. Investors are really important. Scientists with great ideas are important. Infrastructure is important. Procurement's important. And it's all here. So if you're listening to this and you're an innovator, just get out there, be persistent. If you've got a great idea and you've got a good market, keep going and you'll make it through. So thank you very much to all of the panelists. Thank you for those who are listening. I hope you found this of value.
So thank you, Mark, Marie, Fabien, Leopold, and Giorgio for this very lively panel. So it was the last panel of the day. You might have realized it was a recorded panel, and we got some questions through Slido, so we do our best to get back to you. But thanks a lot for your interest in this panel, as it was shown by the question that you sent us.